My name is Andrei, currently the cybersecurity community leader. However, my journey with Heimdal started about almost 6 years ago. That is actually one of the most critical aspects when it comes to patching. And let me explain how this happens. But before that, let's actually take a few steps back and understand what's patching, right? So patching, simply everybody knows, you take an update and you put it on a current application and you patch it. What are the reasons somebody might issue a patch? One, it's a security loophole, a vulnerability, or it's a functionality lack. It might be a bug, it might be a new feature, and so on and so forth. These are the two types. But when we discuss about the risks in patching and why vulnerabilities need to be patched quickly, we're actually talking about the security part of things, okay? Now, let's take it even a step back. So, how does a vendor know that they need to issue a patch, right? So, there are two situations. They either find out in a very friendly way in which somebody internally or a partner or a customer figures something out and shares it with the vendor with no real world impact. That's the lucky way. The unlucky way is that somebody is already exploiting this vulnerability and it is brought to the attention of the vendor by actually a customer of theirs or a partner of theirs being hacked through that vulnerability. Now, from that moment, the vendor starts working on the patch, but before they do that, they actually are obligated by law to publish a CVE, right? And when they do this, when they publish the common vulnerability and exposure entry, in that moment, regardless if this was used before to compromise systems or not, in that moment, everyone in the world knows that there's X vulnerability in X software, and guess what happens? Any wannabe hacker, any serious hacker, any threat actor group, anybody that knows about that and has fun with hacking, and they usually do, they start a bit of a war, a bit of a contest between each other. So they try to find as many vulnerable systems as possible by illegally scanning. Some other people try to use that vulnerability and create an exploit, which is basically an update that's hiding some malware or some malicious code. And then everybody talking on the dark web, on the forums, chatters, and so on and so forth, they basically get together and say, okay, I have the exploit done, here's how it works. I have a list of vulnerable systems across the net, here's how you can get to them. And combined, they even might sell that off as a final product. So since the moment that that CVE is published, you're in a contest or in a war with time, because as soon as they manage to do that, if your system is open to the internet, you'll surely be targeted in a mass attack. So again, patching, when it comes to patching, time is one of the most critical aspects. As soon as possible is the best. So I was a customer success manager for Heimdal on the America territory. And I was working all the holiday shifts all the time because why not, right? It's relaxed, everybody's okay, so why not work the holiday shift? And a customer of mine calls me. They were using some products from us but not patching. So they call me up and they say, Andrei, I know you're working. I guess it's a slow day. Would you mind just grabbing a digital coffee? I want to run a situation by you that looks very, very suspicious to me. And I was like, okay, let's do it. When we met, he was explaining that, hey, this software that we have has this vulnerability. You might know about it. I knew about the vulnerability. It was a big fuss over the entire internet. It was about 1 week old and the patch was already available by the time I'm saying it was 1 week old. So the patch availability was already 1 week old. So after 1 week, the guy started using their patching tool. I don't recall what tool it was, and that's not important. And he starts to look for his computer so that he can push the updates. To his surprise, almost all the computers from the company were lacking that patch, aside of one little department. There were like 6, 7 people. I believe it was finance or something like that, which is a very sensitive department. And he was like, Andrei, why would everybody need this patch aside of finance? And I was like, interesting. Let's actually take a closer look. Can you remote in one of those computers and check, maybe in the application, if you can see when it was last updated? And to his surprise, all of the finance computers were updated 2 days before the moment he decided to start doing the update manually with the update itself. But it was very suspicious because nobody from their team actually did that. So what we also looked at, we looked a bit at a few network captures so that we can see the activity. And all of a sudden, finance, since that update, had very suspicious connections to very weird servers across the world, making no sense whatsoever. They were not using any new tool, they were not changing anything in their procedures, not working with any third-party consultant. So there was no reason, no plausible reason for why they should have had that communication. But still, all the finance computers with all the sensitive data were negotiating information across with very, very suspicious servers. So in that moment, we actually figured out, I told him to lock down the entire network, pull the computers from the internet, disconnect them from the drives, because he actually had an exploit kit installed as the update. So basically an exploit kit is what an attacker uses to disguise their malicious code, as mentioned earlier, in the update of that particular application, because you already trust that application. It's already installed, your security systems know about it, so it won't be too suspicious. Right? That's why they patching or the lack of patches, vulnerabilities in general, are one of, let's say, the most dangerous, if not one of the top 3 most dangerous attack vectors that you need to eliminate ASAP. So yeah, that's the story with one of my former customers that had a massive surprise. Luckily, not too much information was leaked, and they could stop this in time before this grew in a full-scale attack. That's called staggered update. So basically, you have, let's say, a few computers that you can either connect to, and they are a perfect mirror of your general production computers, and you should have this for each department, or you have some, let's say, power users, people that know how to handle themselves, how to report something very fast to you. And what you do is you make sure the updates, or at least the updates for your very sensitive and heavy applications like your operating system, some applications that impact other 20 applications in a cascade fashion, like, I don't know, Java or something like that. Now, when you do that, ideally, yes, you should be able to push it to a few computers. Make sure it doesn't break anything, because if we go back and look at Print Nightmare, Blue Screen of Death, half of the world with computers locked in boot mode and so on and so forth, it was not a pleasant situation, which could have been avoided if they would have done a staggered or ring style update. Now, it is good to do that, but also consider the time that that takes, and also consider the manpower that you have to put behind this process. Now, some tools will allow you to do that automatically, some not. Depending on the use case, I would recommend that for sensitive patches like upgrades to the OS or driver upgrades. Never just go with everything full on, because you will need to accept some risk that might be a bit disruptive in your network. Whew, compliance. Let's talk about patching compliance, and let's also put in, I'll throw in one from my side, which is cyber insurance, right? Let's make a team over here. Well, I don't think there's any compliance framework in the world right now that, if you look at it, and this is a security framework, not data security, not data privacy like your GDPR and so on and so forth. So security, like, I don't know, let's do Cyber Essentials UK, NIST, SIS controls, you name it, right? So any type of security framework, security compliance framework, has patching included. So they need you to know what applications you have on the computers. This is one. They need you to know if those applications still receive updates and are properly maintained, because an end-of-life application means that nobody is looking at fixing vulnerabilities and so on and so forth. They need you to have the process improve that you actually apply the patches. And ideally, you should also have the ability to look back in time and show that you were compliant. If not, storing reports of this patching process in a way that it cannot be tampered with, it's important. And then when you move to the cyber insurance part, this is where it gets interesting, right? Because you buy a premium, right? You put a lot of money down, and in case anything happens to you or to your computers, or I don't know what attack, data compromise, cyber insurance has your back. Not quite. You should read the fine print, because if the cyber insurance company can prove that you did not patch in time, they will actually not give you anything. They will challenge your claim. And of course, they have conditions, right? Depending on your preferred cyber insurer, you can see if they have, let's say, a 3-day patch window, 4-day, 2 weeks, whatever, right? So they might have it per categories, but do read the fine print, because if you do not patch, and this would be an error on your side as a user or a misconfiguration, it's your fault. So they will not pay you anything of that policy that you have with them. That's a good question. They should not fear ransomware itself. Ransomware is just the final stage of a complex cyber attack. They should fear the cyber attack, because once the cyber attackers are in, they can deploy whatever end method they wish. They can just take your data out, and they don't need to ransom it. They can just show that they have it, and they can just extort you for not publishing your data. But okay, let's say ransomware, because everybody wants to be operational. Well, when you look at ransomware, or again, any other advanced cyber attack, that's my usual preferred angle, they have entry methods. Entry methods are also called attack surface, right? So if you can reduce their possibility to enter, or again, reduce the attack surface, diminish the attack surface that your organization has, in that moment, having ransomware or having any other dangerous cyber attack happening has a very, very low chance. Imagine this. You have, let's take an example of attack surface. Internet connections, right? Admin rights on the computer, vulnerabilities on the computer, and allowing any application to run in the computer without your approval, okay? Let's imagine we take out the internet part, right? We now have security over what our computers are allowed to connect to. We take out the admin rights, and we do not allow local admin rights or domain admin rights on the computers or on the server, right? We use a tool for that. Then we take out also the ability for them to use outdated software, right? Because we patch. And then we also take out the ability for them to run any other executable in our computers or our servers aside of the list of what we have approved. Now, let's see how they actually deploy that ransomware in the organization. There's just one chance that they can still use, which is a supply chain attack, right? Because that's using a software you already have installed, and that's more of a how fast do you respond and contain type of a situation than how do you secure versus that. Because it's not you that should secure versus that. It's actually the vendor that is developing and maintaining the software that has been breached and used for the supply chain. So again, taking it back just to the patching piece. If you make sure you are up to date, you will make their lives and their mission way more difficult than allowing them to utilize this. That's basically it. But you should still look at also reducing your attack surface from all the other angles mentioned. Very, very important. It's quite simple. The process itself is pretty heavy. If that particular organization does not use something that fully automates the process with just some very small manual intervention, then what they do is they usually classify vulnerabilities via risk. So they look at, okay, this is this vulnerability, it can cause this damage. However, I have this software on this and this and this machine. These are machines that are currently not facing the internet, or these are machines that are heavily secured right now. And I would not prioritize this versus other vulnerabilities that I need to fix. Well, when you make applying patches and patch management a full part exposed to all the rules that you do your regular vulnerability management, you actually might risk overlooking one vulnerability that's with a medium score because you consider, or the person that did the analysis considers, that that server will never be internet facing or something like that. And all of a sudden that server gets internet facing, and what happens then? You're vulnerable. So basically, people tend to not want to spend the time and to be so meticulous in the process of testing, of looking at them, on reporting of them. Some of them do right now just because it's a compliance factor. It's a mandatory factor. But keep in mind, find a tool that you can automate. You can easily create that staggered process of updates, which is production versus test versus production and so on. Find a tool that is easily controllable. You can schedule this process to happen when you want. You know that the second day you go in and you start checking what took place. And yeah, find a tool that gives you the most control that you can have, gives you the least complexity when it comes to configuring it, managing it, and so on. And that gives you the highest degree of automation. And yeah, job done.